people in, so ready when you are.
Kick off. Okay, well, thank you for joining us today on this session where we're going to tell you about the changing landscape for technical professionals, higher education and research. So my name's Claire and my colleague is Mel, and we'll introduce ourselves properly in a second. I've been told to say welcome to the session and thank you for joining. Please use the question and answer function throughout to ask your questions to the speakers, and make sure you use this function to ask questions rather than the chat, as they will not be seen. You can use the chat to add your own views, insights and suggestions about the topics we discussed today with other attendees whilst we're talking. The webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Universities UK Events web YouTube page, and you'll receive an email from UUK once it's available to view. So with that, I think we'll kick off because we've got an introduction as part of our presentation. Is that okay, Tom? Yeah?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. So over to you, Mel, to introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you very much, Claire, and thanks everyone for coming to this session. So yeah, what's in front of you now on the screen is what I'm hoping will be seen as an upward spiral, and this kind of hopefully is a bit representative of my career. Next slide, please, Claire. And I started off at Newcastle University way back in 1984 as a trainee technician. And the relationship that I had as sort of my sphere of influence sort of thing was really that was almost one-to-one with a PI. Then it was a 4-year traineeship, but after 2 years, I managed to secure a research technician's post. And again, that relationship was still very much one-to-one. And then in 1988, it was a bit of a leap, really. I started specializing a little bit more in technical skills, and that was recognized, and my spiral went up a bit, and my influence was around a unit within a department. And that continued for some time until 1998, when this was a real shift, when I started to realize that in order to progress my career, I had to start thinking about supervision and management and getting those skills on board as a way forward. And at the same time, the universities were reorganizing, and that's certainly true of Newcastle too. And my sort of spiral went up another level to that of a school. And that trend continued pretty much. And in 2005, saw me as technical manager within an institute, and I started also to explore other things outside the university ecosystem a bit wider with HETED, and became a chartered scientist as well. And 2019 saw yet another reorganization, and that expanded yet further, both internally with the university. We start thinking about me working at faculty university level. And also extracurricularly with the technician commitment to the National Technicians Development Centre. So yes, it's true, as I progressed, your sphere of influence grows, it's always going to, but also what happened in parallel with that is the reorganisations, which just went on making bigger and bigger units, which I think is quite an interesting development in the landscape. Right, over to you, Claire.
Okay, so there's a mistake in this one. So I just thought I'd give a quick introduction to myself. So I did my degree at Liverpool University, then I worked in industry for a year, and this led me on to be able to work as an industrial scientist for 3 years in contract research. After that, I moved to where I am now at Johnny Centre, and 26 years later, I'm still there, although my role has changed a lot in that time. I started off as a research technician in structural biology. I did some online learning. I had a baby. I did a part-time PhD. And I progressed to working on a platform role as a technical specialist in structural biology. And then as part of this, I became an honorary lecturer at UEA, and I got heavily involved in forming the technician voice at John Innes Centre and working externally a lot more related to the technician commitments. And that's given me lots of different opportunities. In the day job, I ended up managing a biophysics facility. And then last year, I moved completely out of direct science as a technician into senior management as head of directorate at the Institute. So I've also had quite a varied career path, and we're telling this to introduce ourselves, but also because it links with a lot of things of opportunities that are available for technicians now in the sphere. So I'm going to kick us off, and then I'm going to hand off over to Mel to do the second half of it in a bit. So we're talking about the changing landscape for technicians, and why is there a changing landscape? Why did we need a technician-focused initiative? Well, for that, I need to take you back to 2017. So back in 2017, technicians were often seen as a minority staff group in university and research ecosystems. They come from a wide range of disciplines. We tend to think of technicians as science and engineering, but also there's lots of technicians in creative arts, in communications, and a wide range of different fields. They often have very varied roles. This might be in teaching, supporting teaching, or it might be in doing research, or it might be a specialist on facilities. And they have a range of different experience and being very generalist in supporting the science to really specialist roles. And this was often really, there's lack of understanding around this, and the technicians themselves didn't have much of a voice in the process. Organisations themselves found it difficult to even identify who their technical staff were, and the perception of what these technical staff did is often misaligned. There was a severe lack of development opportunities, lack of value and recognition, and there often lacked a career pathway to create a sustainable technical workforce. So that was 2017. The Science Council back in about 2015 created this definition of what they thought a technician was. And I really like this definition because although it was created by the Science Council, I think it applied to any technical role. So this definition says a technician is a person who's skilled in particular techniques. They solve problems that often require ingenuity and creativity. They sometimes work with complex instruments, and they require specialised training to do their job effectively. So I think that encompasses the wide range of different technical roles you can see in some of these pictures around this definition. So I'm going to give you an introduction to the technician commitments. So the technician commitments, Kelly and others realised that there was this lack of understanding around technical careers and what was going to be done about it. And the technician commitment was created in 2017, and it's a university and research institution-led initiative, and it was led by a sector board of steering bodies supported by the Science Council and Technician Make It Happen campaign, Gatsby. Today, in 2023, we have 110 universities and institutes, and one international institute have become signatories and supporters of the technician commitment. And importantly, some of our supporters include funders like UKRI and the Wellcome Trust and the professional bodies. So it's a really big thing in 2023 now. So what were the aims and the visions of the technician commitment? Well, they were really to create a collective action to coordinate and drive initiatives forward that would increase the visibility, recognition, opportunity and sustainability for technical staff. And wanted to work so that technicians were motivated, engaged and proud to be technicians, and that a technical career is something that others would aspire to have in. There was also a vision to influence policy pertaining to technical roles and careers. So what is involved in this? Well, we said it's a collective action. So we have our signatories and supporters, and everybody has to sign a pledge to sign up to increase the visibility, recognition, career development and sustainability of technical careers at their university or institution. And this is underpinned by evaluating the impact of this. So when organisations sign up to be a signatory, they have a year to see where they are, and then they have to create their first 2-year action plan. And then after 2 years, they have to report on the initiatives that they've got in this action plan to see where they've progressed. This then leads on to a 3-year action plan. And our founding signatories are now currently getting to the end of their 3-year action plan. So the assessments on these action plan are externally assessed by a peer review panel, and the action plans need to be publicly available and signed off by the VC or the director. So there's definite evidence of top-down support for these actions. What just as crucial is that there's evidence in the action plans and the assessment that technicians themselves and the technician voice at the universities were involved in developing these action plans. So it really is something that's driven by technicians for technicians. Other things that have happened as part of the technician commitment, approximately twice a year, we have these signatory events where we bring all the signatory representatives together to share good practice, listen to talks and hear from progress across the whole sector. These have been held at some amazing venues, and that's on purpose because it's something that we want technicians to be proud of. They're really good events, a lot of like-minded people getting together, really looking how we can address these big questions for technical staff. Part of the events, there's always a celebration in the evening for signatories that have completed their assessments, and they're conferred with either a reward of submission for the first one or a reward of impact. Other things Technician Commitment have done to increase recognition is they've been an official sponsor of the Times Higher Education Awards. They've done this since 2019, and they sponsor the Outstanding Technician of the Year Award, and you can see the previous winners on this slide. The Times Higher Education Award never had an award for technical staff, and now technicians are celebrated on the same stage as all the other awards, which I think is a really big leap forward. I wanted to give a highlight of a few of the other things of the collective actions from our signatories. The Technician Commitment have run a collaboration fund. We do this yearly, and we've awarded 17 awards of up to £2,000 each. The applicants have to show that it's a collaboration award, so it's about signatories working with other signatories to progress things. And there's been a range of different awards, including some for research, some for job shadowing, others for hosting partnership conferences and networks. And we've seen quite good output from these 17 awards. The Technician Commitment also gives an opportunity for 2 technicians each year to work alongside the Royal Institution Christmas lectures. And if you want to find out more about the experience that the technicians had in being involved in this, we've got some excellent blogs on our website. Back in 2017, the Crick Institute had an exhibition on technicians called Craft and Graft. And then last year, the Gatsby-funded Technician Gallery at the Science Museum opened. We had our most recent signatory event there, and if you haven't been to the Technician Gallery at the Science Council, I really suggest you go. It's really inspiring, and it's an excellent way to show what technical careers are and how people should aspire to them. Our signatories all have their own action plan, and they drive forward the key things that are important for their institution. And we share the outputs of these action plans on our website, so you can get a feeling of what other people are doing and how you can utilize and share experience. Some of the things that have happened is now that technicians are on committees at their institution university. This means that they have a voice, often at a very high level in the organisation, so their views are heard. So hopefully they're no longer invisible. Several organisation signatories have created fair attribution policies, where they have guidelines and policies in place to ensure that everybody that has contributed to research is acknowledged fairly. There's a large number of technical networks spread across the country, and a lot of these have come out of signatory organisations working together on joint venues. The University of Liverpool recently released their Research Technical Professional Career Pathway, which is a career pathway for technical staff at Liverpool, and this was the first, and it shows clear progression through without having to leave a technical career to move to an academic pathway. There's large numbers of conferences now focused for technicians. 2 are listed here: HETS, Higher Education Technician Summit, which is in July. And at HETS, they had the PAPIN Awards. So this is a really I think they had 362 applications this year, with over 60 technicians shortlisted for the awards. And there's an increasing number of recognition awards for technical staff. Also listed as a Technician Partnership Conference, which is held in Newcastle every 2 years, and it's an excellent event. So alongside this collective action, it was really important that we contributed to big policy changes. And the Technician Commitment now is high profile in its own right, and it sits alongside other established initiatives, such as the Research and Development Concordat and the Athena Swan Charter. So I've just got a few clips here from some of the examples. So in the early days, this is Kelly at the launch of the R&D People and Culture Strategy, and technicians are very much part of this document. And I think it was the first time that technicians have been included in documents like this. Members of the Technician Commitment team were involved in the independent review of bureaucracy to bring a technical perspective into this. Technicians are mentioned in the UK Research and Development Roadmap. And recently, the Technician Commitment have been engaging with the Concordance and Agreements Review to see how we can work collectively together to move things forward across the whole sphere. UKRI released their People and Teams Action Plan, which details how the actions they're going to put in place around the Technician Commitment, and it's worth a read. So the Technician Commitment now is 6 years old, and last year we commissioned an independent consultant to do a review of the progress and impact of what the Technician Commitment has achieved in its first 5 years. And this report is available on our website. It was conducted independently. There was a survey and interviews with a whole range of people. And it lists lots of examples of the impact the Technician Commitment has had, especially, I think, around visibility and recognition. However, we're not there yet. There's still progress to be made, particularly around technical careers and sustainability. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Mel, who will continue the story. Over to you, Mel.
Oh, thanks, Claire. Well, Claire's given a good background to the Technician Commitment, which I think we're going to coin as one of the first superheroes in this story, and I think the second superhero in this story of changing culture for technicians is that of MI Talent. Now, MI Talent is a £4.9 million investment led by Midlands Innovation, and it was started in 2020. And it was a collaborative initiative, as you can see the partners on the screen there. And the fundamental sort of driver for the MI Talent project really was about gaining that understanding, that greater understanding of future requirements for technicians and skills. So how did it get on? What's it been doing? How's it actually done this? Well, it's got 3 work streams. That around policy, that about culture change, and that about training and empowerment. And what I want to do is just scratch the surface of each one of these and give you a bit of a flavour of what that actually means in practice. So if we look at training and empowerment first, I can get it changed, there we are. So one of the things that to me is amazing is the Herschel Programme for Women in Technical Leadership. And it started about a year ago, where there was a programme that was put together, a 6-month programme which combined both formal learning and action learning sets. And the call went out, and the expectation was that maybe 30 people might sign up. Well, to everyone's surprise, 170 people responded from 55 institutions. And so the program actually ran with 170 people instead of 30, which was phenomenal. I mean, what an achievement. And all of those 170 people got to the end of it. And the call went out again this year. And this year, 350 people responded to that call from 72 institutions. And that program's almost at its end now. So by the time it finishes, that's more than 500 women that are in technical leadership roles or they're aspiring to technical leadership roles have actually gone through this training and probably feel more supported, more confident in that sort of role. That's amazing. And equally, what's just new for this year is a executive program in strategic technical leadership. and that has 14 fully funded places. And again, the call for that has just closed, and I'm aware that it's oversubscribed. And so obviously that will progress as well. Now, what this is saying to me is that there's a huge demand, really, that illustrates the real need for technical focused training. And so it's really good to see that that's being addressed. And certainly MI Talent have a big role in that. The second work stream was around culture change projects. And one way to sort of illustrate this is the number of reports that have recently come out over that time frame that have addressed, what you might call hot topics. And the first one of those was that addressed equality, diversity, and inclusion. But there's been others around COVID-19, around funding technicians, and of course knowledge exchange. But the one I want to pick out today is specifically the one about research culture and how that's seen through a technician's lens. Now, we've been hearing all day about some of the things that have been happening in this space and how technicians have been included. But the work that led up to this report was a big survey, and some of the feedback that they got in this survey, three headlines really jumped out at me, and that was technicians themselves don't always feel that research culture is for them. It's almost like it's for somebody else in the organisation, but not for them. So that was quite a surprising result, for me to read that, to think, well, we thought we were doing quite well here. We thought we were trying to be as inclusive as possible, and we are. But there's still some people that don't feel it's for them. So there's a bit of work to do in that space. The other thing that surprised me, in some ways, was about the lack of recognition, technicians' lack of recognition for their contributions. And that's not just what they do directly on research projects. It's not about being an author necessarily. It's about what you might do as a good citizen, as it were. You might have a health and safety responsibility or something like that. And of course, it turns out that there's quite a lack of recognition for people under doing tasks like that. And that's something that, we're certainly starting to look at in Newcastle, and I'm sure others are too in response to this report. And the third thing that jumped out at me was, it's a long-going issue, is about the lack of time for development opportunities and the lack of a career progression, lack of a clear pathway, which is something that Claire mentioned in her part of the talk. So in summary, there's huge amounts of good work going on in the research culture space where it intersects with that of the life of a technician, but clearly there's a little bit more to do as well, and certainly to get that consistency within an organisation and across the sector, because it's not always consistent. So that was some of the work that they've done in that space around culture. And the final one in the work stream was around policy, and the Talent Commission report, which was launched last year, is a real landmark policy document. This really made a step change in a number of ways. And first of all, the commissioners that contributed to this policy commission report weren't just technicians. I think that's a really important point to make. It was quite a diverse bunch of commissioners, and there was funders, there was vice chancellors, there were publishers, and yes, there were technicians as well. They were included, of course, and through their research findings, they brought together 16 recommendations, and they were evidence-based, and it gives a blueprint for what good looks like, no question. If all these recommendations are being followed, then that's certainly a good example. And what I want to do is just give you a flavour of what that might look like. So the 16 recommendations fell really into 5 categories around hiring talent, training and development of the current workforce, EDI, we've talked a bit about that already, recognition, and decision making. And if you want to just do a bit of a dive into all of that, this was some of the recommendations as they came out of the report. And there's some reoccurring themes in there for me, what we talked about what Claire talked about earlier and what we've heard already this morning. That about EDI, about addressing that EDI challenge and those facing the technical community. There's also that piece that comes up again about the career pathways. and sustainability of skills and careers. But there's also some new themes I thought were really quite interesting. That around blurring the boundary between technical and academic roles. That about funding salaries, making sure that posts are secure. And also the last recommendation was about creation of a new collaborative entity to influence and advocate for the technical community. So recommendations by themselves obviously are fantastic, but to make them better, someone's actually got to do something. And one of the first groups to do something was the Midlands Innovation themselves. And they very quickly after the report was launched, I think it might have been almost on the same day in May, they produced their response about how they were going to work together to deliver these recommendations. And that's really starting to move the whole job forward, and that's why it's a step change. And they weren't alone, because Liverpool, as Claire's already mentioned, have recently published their RTP pathway, which again, that revolutionizes the way that technicians are graded and how they're given the opportunities to progress their careers. See if we can change the slide, right. Of course, there's other benefits to following those recommendations, and there was a report published about 3 months ago which suggests that there's economic benefits too, both within the university ecosystem and beyond. And for me, these kind of fall into two categories. There's the improving the culture, which generates better outcome because you're working more efficiently, you've got lower costs, you've got less turnover of staff, all that type of thing that goes with culture. But the second thing is a more direct economic benefit when it comes to really looking at at how technicians' posts are funded, how those salaries are funded, and by working in a different way and making sure that they're securely funded. One case study in this report saved 30% in a year, which equated to something like £300,000 based on having the right funding in place for those technical salaries. So that's quite a significant economic benefit for sure. So that's another benefit of that Midlands Innovation Policy Commission. So Claire talked a lot about the technician commitment and how that's influenced the culture strand, if you like. I've talked a little bit about Midlands Innovation and how that's generated sector knowledge and understanding and opportunity. But recommendation 16, if you remember, of the MI Talent Policy Commission was to create a new national entity, a collaborative entity. And that is the UK Institute for Technical Skills and Strategy. Now that's a £5.5 million red-funded initiative, which again is collaborative. And it will come into being on the 1st of August this year. It's multi-stakeholder. It's got shared governance, it's got technical input, and it will deliver change. And the work streams that sit around this Venn diagram, really, we can see there was quite a lot of interconnection. The first work stream is around insight, and that's based around, again, more research, more data to understand the landscape, not just the general landscape, but how technicians fit into that landscape, into the whole R&D landscape. The next work stream is around influence. How can we inform policy, influence policy, and interpret policy? That needs a lot of work. It's becoming more important. Claire's already given us some good examples of how that started to shift. And also, how can we work with professional bodies? Sorry, how can we work with professional bodies to make technical roles more appealing to young people and to secure that pipeline of talent? There's also some work around innovation. We need to showcase technology and technologists. There's already a UK technology specialist network being set up as part of this work stream. And the final work stream really is around integration, and that's about shared ownership, exchange of best practice, and it's also going to be the new home for the technician commitment. So over the last 6 years or so, you see there's been some real progress, some massive progress, and certainly, 6 years ago, I wouldn't have imagined us sitting here at a UUK event talking about technicians. And if you just look at the slide on the bottom section of it, you can see a timeline for 2023. We've talked about most of that already, and there's just the bit on the right, which really alludes to how the technician commitment sits in that Concordat space alongside other Concordats, which Claire mentioned. And crucially, in the last few weeks, the EPSRC have got a call out for strategic technical platforms, which is aimed at funding some real innovation work around technicians and their specialists and their specialisms. And that's going to be really interesting to see how that goes forward, and I'm sure that will have some huge benefit too. So what I want to say is that my penultimate slide, I need to say thank you to everyone, those of you, of course, that are listening. Thank you to those of people on the technician commitment team, which are the people on the bottom. But most of all, thanks to those people in the organisation that absolutely make it happen. Those are the people on the ground that make it happen. And we're all indebted to those. And a short while ago, about 3 or 4 months ago, Technician Commitment got a video made, and I want to share that with you because it absolutely sums up everything that we've just been talking about in the last 20 minutes or so.
Thank you, Mel. So I hope see you all like the video. And that's it for us. So we're happy to take any questions. I see we've got one already. So maybe if I ask that to you, Mel.
Yeah, thanks.
So Nicola Simcock says, it's interesting to hear from Mel that some technicians don't feel this work is for them. Any ideas about why this is and how better to engage these colleagues?
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly because I didn't see the data and there was no context around the data when it came in, I'm guessing. But my own experience is that it's probably a combination of two things. That around communication, it's quite hard to communicate even some simple initiatives around a complex organization, and maybe the communications isn't getting through. That would certainly be one of my suggestions. Others, we don't know. All the different universities are all on a different trajectory and made different progress with their research culture projects. And I'm guessing that because we're not all at the same level, there are some institutions that are playing catch up to others, and that's probably as well why they're just in a different place and why they don't feel that their technicians are included. in their research culture projects? I'm just guessing. I don't really have a concrete answer.
I mean, I guess I just thought that maybe because in the past that technicians were sometimes left out on things and not consulted, actually it takes time for them to realise that actually that they are included in things now, and it's important that their viewpoints are heard as well. So I think it's maybe a bit two-way. We have a question coming in from John Lockhart. They ask, is there a comparable model in other countries, for example, the USA? My experience was the role of technicians there was well recognised in USA institutions as core parts of research teams. So, I mean, from my perspective, I'm not an expert of what happens in the USA, but we have one international signatory now in Sydney, and they're using the technician commitment model, but obviously Australia has different systems in place, and we're hoping that we can learn from each other a little bit through that as well. I don't know if you've got any other comments you want to add to that, Mel?
No, I think that's absolutely spot on, Claire. Yeah.
I've also seen in the chat, I don't know if this was supposed to be a question or not, Jose, because it's not in the questions and answers, but I'll read it out anyway. Jose's asking, what fellowships are available for technicians, and what can technicians achieve with these fellowships? So, I mean, I don't know if there's actually fellowships for technicians in that sense. I mean, there's lots of different opportunities for technicians. There's lots of different ways you can develop your career. I'm not exactly sure in what relation you're asking. Do you have any comments on that, Mel?
No, I think there isn't anything. We don't have anything that's called fellowships for technicians as such. I mean, there's just different roles within the technicians communities doing different things. It's a very diverse workforce, as you know. There's different pathways into being a technician. And we're certainly looking to try and expand that over time. So there's no fellowship route, but there are different pathways into a technical career.
And there's hopefully different ways to develop that career while you're in it, whether it's in the same role or whether it's moving to a different role and a different opportunity through skills that you've gained. We don't. Jose says thanks. So does anybody else have any other questions?
Is it all right if I come in with a question? Just because I think the next session, taking a bit of a forward look at the concordats and agreements, and you mentioned the concordats and agreements. I was just wondering if you had future for the technician commitment in particular, and what changes do you think you'd like to see, and what do you think is still needed?
Do you want me to kick off with that, Mel?
Yeah, go for it.
So the Concordat agreement review was run by UKRI, and there were several different phases to it, and the technician commitment were fully involved and engaged in that process, as were the other concordats, and they just recently published their phase 2 report, so you should have a look at that if you haven't seen it, which maps out from their perspective where they think things could be going. And it's not saying that it's it's the end of the technician commitment, it's the end of this concordance, but how we can work together to maybe streamline some of the bureaucracy around it, whilst understanding that actually the need for these things is for some accountability as well. But it's about getting the balance right, so it doesn't become a project in its own right. It drives the right things forward. So as a team, we're fully engaged with that. And I think the next step is for initiative owners to come together to really look at how this can be mapped in the future to make the recording less onerous, but while still achieving the key things. Do you want to add any more to that, Mel?
Yeah. I think that's definitely the right direction of travel, and thinking about it from the end user perspective as well. It's about getting that read across all the different concordats and getting that synergy and that integration, because that's what we're kind of missing at the minute. There's lots of good initiatives, there's lots of good concordats, there's lots of good work to be done, but it's about bringing it together And there's just not enough join up or oversight within an organisation, and that's what we actually need next to actually just cement it all together.
Thanks for that, both. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, we have a few more minutes, so I might ask one more question if that's okay, and then if no more come through, then we can close things. If that's okay. But yeah, I guess just reflecting on sort of all the great work over the last 6 years that you kind of showcased there, and all the sort of positive progress over the last 6 years or so. I guess, what do you think has been the biggest change over the last 6 years? What do you think the biggest impact has been from the?
Well, if I can kick on this one, because it's quite an easy one to answer for myself. I think the biggest impact by far is that whole visibility piece, where technicians weren't visible and now they are. And I know from initiatives back in Newcastle University, when a new initiative starts up, the first thing that people start looking for is a representative from the technical community, where previously we would have never even been thought of, never mind being asked. And that, to me, that is a huge step forward to actually be in the consciousness now.
Yeah, I would agree with that from our perspective as well. So I started our technician voice at the Institute back in 2015. And back then, every time there was an opportunity, I nearly always had to mail the person and say, just checking that this is for technicians as well as postdocs or students. And I don't have to do that now. And for me, one of the biggest impacts was I was at a governing council away day, so all the great and good from the institutes here. And one of the directors of one of the other institutes, there was a discussion point, and he stood up and he sort of said how valuable the technicians were to the research at his institute. I used to have to do that back in 2015, but now the directors of the institutes are doing that. So the message is getting through. And I think a lot of it is through the commitment from UKRI in really driving this forward in terms of it being on the agenda. And I think it really makes a big difference, and we're starting to see changes.
Brilliant. Thanks, Claire and Mel. Yeah, that was really interesting and helpful discussion and presentation. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to, if there's no more questions, I'll sort of give it a couple of minutes or seconds. It doesn't look like anything's coming through, so might end the webinar 5 minutes early if that's okay. And the next session is at I think 2:10, and like I say, that'll be sort of future of research culture. So thank you very much, everyone, and I'm going to end the webinar there.
Thank you.